Hey there, guys. So I want to thank you, as always, for taking the time to check out today's video, which, of course, as always, I do want to, of course, share with you guys who are new that every single weekend I do share a video when it comes to LGBTQ topics and really addressing why it's important to discuss these topics, especially, of course, now with the way things are. My main focus, of course, on my channel has always been to, be a sort of supportive voice and an encouraging voice. This channel is primarily, of course, focused on a combination of fitness, health, as well as, of course, embracing identity, whether that be, of course, sexual or gender identity. And that's been my focus, since I've really, of course, came out and come into my own over these past few months and coming into this year. So, what I want to discuss today, and again, I've went over so many different topics since I've really been able to really open up and share a lot of what all of these things mean to me. One of the topics I want to discuss today is on celebrating pride outside of just Pride Month itself and going to Pride itself. One thing that really resonated with me a lot whenever I was, coming out was pride. If you have talked to anybody who knows me, pride is a really big deal with me. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And I've mentioned before that there's people that would not understand why, I emphasize pride so much and why I, am really, adamant and really, open about sharing pride when it comes to, the rainbow flag, when it comes to, of course, being open and sharing who I am. The reason why I do share pride the way I do, and I do really focus on emphasizing it, is that it helps when you are able to be authentic and really help others. When you are authentic and when they see who you are and they see you being open and honest with yourself, and for people who are not maybe out or are struggling, this is what allows them to have a sense of belonging, to have a sense of knowing that somebody is there for them. And so that's why I think it's important to take the time to, of course, really share our stories, as I've said, and live openly. So there are many different ways that you can think about, you know, celebrating pride any, time of year. And that comes with, of course, the first concept is, embracing your authentic self, being yourself, whether that be masculine or feminine, whoever you are, embrace that. Be open with your identity. And I think, again, this helps others. This is not just, for you alone. It does create a sense of belonging for others. When you see different stories, like when you watch different TV shows, movies, or even read books, when you see these types of stories, whether it be queer stories, LGBTQ stories, things of that nature, when you see these stories and you read these stories, they give you a sense of belonging. That's something that happened a lot of times whenever I was growing up and, watching a lot of the shows that I watched and sort of seeing those minor, characters in those shows that were gay. And there was something that I knew that I resonated with. I could understand the same feelings that they're going through. And, that's why, again, why a lot of the sort of movies, and the books that I like have a lot of gay themes in them. And the reason why, even like with horror, a lot of times, even though we don't think about it as being, gay in particular, the horror genre is very, you know, LGBTQ friendly, and it always has been. And I would love to discuss this topic in and of itself because horror is a big thing with me, and you've likely noticed it from what I have in the background. Um, and I think it does. I think the reason why horror is really connects with LGBTQ people is that it really preys on our fears and it preys on our vulnerabilities and our anxieties. And so I think that's why, horror movies, generally with a lot of queer and LGBTQ audiences, why they connect so much because of, that sort of emotional sort of grasp that comes with horror. And again, a lot of the different movies and shows that I watch, a lot of them have that type of theme. One of my favorite movies that I'd started or that I watched again, over the past few years that really connected with me when I watched it, even though it's not a horror movie, American Beauty, which is what I have in here in the corner, the poster. That story in that movie really, when I watched it, it just clicked. Like it just related with me so many different ways. And I think a lot of the reasons why that story clicked so much is because at the time I was 29. I was around, it was my, it was soon when I was about to turn 30. And see, I'm about to turn 31 in this coming April. But at that time, I was 29. And here lately, I know it's going to sound weird to say this, but I've kind of been going through quote unquote a quarter life crisis where I've been freaking out about my age. And I know it's not that big of a deal. It's kind of really dumb to worry about it, but I'm somebody who deals with anxiety. So it's just like a constant thing with me. Like I'm worried about all of these random things all the time. So the reason why it connected with me is that it had the story of, this, of course, the main story is over a man that's going into like he's in a midlife crisis basically. That's the pretty much what American Beauty is about navigating that feeling of feeling like you're not wanted and feeling like you're like, your life is pretty much at its end, that there's nothing more good that's going to happen. And another thing too with the elements that I like in American Beauty is the concept of something being on the surface being beautiful, but behind the scenes and it's not as beautiful as it looks. That's kind of like, when we think of, I guess, dysfunctional families, we see them as perfect on the outside in their pictures, but then under the surface is not that perfect. I've always liked that sort of story, that sort of, I guess, that concept in itself, where something on the surface looks beautiful, but it's not as beautiful as it portrays itself. So you may be asking, why does this concept relate to pride? It does in a lot of ways, because the reasons why it relates to that is because it is connecting with our story. American Beauty does have a lot of queer themes in it, especially, of course, with one of the characters. And if you've not seen the film, I'm not going to mention it, but it does have a lot of different queer themes in it. And the same can be said for a lot of horror movies. There's a lot of queer themes that come into like the Scream franchise, many different franchises, even not Friday the 13th. Well, Friday the 13th could have some, but I was thinking of Nightmare on Elm Street. A lot of different queer references that are in those movies as well. And so, again, I think why these types of movies again resonate is because they prey on those vulnerabilities and they really relate in that way. And so I think when you consume a lot of these stories, it does give you that sense of, okay, somebody else is understanding, somebody else sort of gets this. And so that's why, again, why I love, those types of, those types of films and movies like that when it comes to horror is because it puts you in an uncomfortable situation. And so again, it just faces those anxieties. And I think that's important. And I think that's what we have to face a lot of times. I think our stories, when it comes to being out and open as a gay person, there's a lot of anxieties and there's a lot of different things that we have to navigate that other people don't have to navigate the same way. And so again, that's a form of sort of really expressing, sort of that understanding, when you consume this type of content. Another thing too that you can really think about is, of course, like I've mentioned, really taking the time to, support those who are trying to advance, of course, rights for us. And like I've mentioned, I don't want to dive into, of course, all the organizations because I did touch on that. But I think it's important to really research and find places that are really wanting to, you know, help to advance, civil rights for gay people. And even though, this kind of sounds like, oh well, this ain't, we've got, we have the freedom to marry and this and that, but it's still important because a lot of these things are being under attack in a lot of ways. I've seen so much, and especially here in Tennessee, it's pretty bad with how many different legislation is thrown around in different legislation that is trying to, whether that be for trans individuals or, gay individuals, and really trying to suppress, gay marriage itself or, marriage equality. That's being thrown around a lot in Tennessee. There's a lot of bills that are thrown around here. It's gotten extremely bad here where they, like with drag queens, they've gotten to the point to where they want to completely restrict, that form of expression. Like it's insane. It's gotten really bad. And so what I'm trying to say is make it, you know, more of a priority to really support those who are, of course, supporting you and who are being there for you and trying to really push for equal rights for you as an individual, because I think that's important. And again, like I said, do your research with, the organizations that you support. That's what I do. Like I said, there's ways that you can really find, transparency on those organizations and if they are legitimate. So I'm one of those types of people where I like to know, exactly, who I'm supporting. And that's the same like with my business. I'm the same way. Like I'll share, this is my credentials, this is who I am, and so that's why I always, like, you've probably seen a video where I was explaining how you see my personal credentials for, personal training. And that's the reason why I do that, because I think it's important to understand what you're investing into and what you're, sending your money to. And I think that's just something that we should think about and we should be more mindful of, rather than just, going about it without having any thought. It's important to think for ourselves, in other words. So I think it's important to really encourage that. And again, I think another thing you should think about as well is to, advocate in small ways, to really recognize people, to, you know, if somebody, is going through a difficult time, or if somebody, maybe you see somebody and they're going through a situation, you know, and they're really struggling, if they're, LGBTQ, take time to listen to them, take time to understand, what they're going through. Even if you're somebody who's not, LGBTQ, I think it helps to have somebody there to listen to. For many years, like I mentioned, I went through therapy for a long time. And a lot of people, I would always hear a lot of people say that, we should just exercise and therapy is just what it is. And I used to think, maybe that's true, but then the more that I thought about it, it's really not, because yes, fitness does have many benefits. It does have mental health benefits in a lot of ways. Helps a lot with really bringing confidence in yourself, of course. I think it's very important to include fitness in your lifestyle. I think, like I said, that's why I do personal training, because I do think it's important for each of us to live healthier lifestyles, to live, because it gives us longevity as we age. We live a more fulfilling life. We're able to have more energy. We're able to enjoy life more when we take care of ourselves. So, yes, fitness does, of course, have that benefits. But I think it is also important, too, that we really, talk to others, when we're having struggles, because even whenever, I was working out at the same time when I was going to therapy. And so I was still, even though I was exercising, yes, I was feeling better from exercises, but I still kind of had that sort of feeling where I was struggling mentally with a lot of, again, sexual identity issues and things of that nature. So I had to go and talk to somebody so that I can, get those thoughts out. You can't have, you have to have one with the other. You have to be able to talk to somebody, you have to be social with somebody while also, physically taking care of yourself. It can't just be separate. So that's why I think it's important to, again, I think that's another form of pride in itself. When you focus on really managing your mental well-being, really understanding, again, I think therapy is a good thing. I think it is very beneficial in a lot of ways. And I think it's really brought a lot of, strength out of me as a person. When you're able to really explain what you're going through, because a lot of times for me throughout my life, there's been many times where I felt like I can't talk to, like, I can't really explain to people, or I can't really talk to somebody about what I'm going through, because I feel like it's like I wouldn't want to burden them, or I feel like they really wouldn't understand what I'm trying to say. And so I just think it's important to, again, don't hesitate to use that resource. Use that resource. If you are struggling and you really need someone there, and you need somebody to listen, even somebody listening to you really helps. It helps to have an ear to listen to, even if they don't say anything. I think that helps a lot, and I think, again, there's so many different resources. It's kind of hard, of course, if you live in the South like me, when you're trying to find all of these resources, but it is possible. Um, it's just sad that if you're somebody who's LGBTQ in certain areas, that resources are almost completely non-existent. I mean, that's just the way it is in some areas. So, and like I said, the best way that you can really find that sense of belonging, and of course, celebrate your pride in yourself, is of course finding those communities online. That's where I've found a lot of my really close friends, is, of course, through traveling when I would go to, more LGBTQ friendly places, but also finding communities online. And I've met some really amazing friends online. And I know, it is hard to sometimes connect with people online, but I think, again, finding that community for you is really beneficial in so many ways. So that's pretty much all I wanted to discuss. There are so many different ways that you can celebrate pride and really, again, be open and honest with yourself. Even if you are in a place where you are struggling with, being open with yourself, do small things that give you that joy, that really allow you to feel a sense of belonging, even in a place where you don't feel like you belong. Again, consume those, like the movies that I've mentioned, the content, so you can feel that sense of belonging, because that's something that really, even music as well, music has played a tremendous role in me finding that sense of belonging and calm with chaos, and when I feel like I didn't belong where I was at. Find that sort of, I guess the way I can describe it is that sort of safe bubble of pride, where you, whether that be movies, or whether that be music or books or anything like that, where you can celebrate in your own way. And like I said, I think pride is important now more than ever, and especially if you're somebody who is in an area where it's difficult. Pride is the purpose of being honest, open, being visible, and telling others that this is who we are. This is, this is not something that is changeable. This is not something that is alterable. We are who we are. And that's the whole point. That's why the symbol of pride is a rainbow. We are a spectrum. We're a spectrum of people. I always say the world is not black and white, and it never is. We are a complete spectrum of people. There's no, everybody has their own unique identity. And so, again, embrace yourself. This is one thing, I say this all the time. Like I said, the reason why I think pride is so important, again, this is not just a 1 month thing, this is year round, is because there's so many people before us that have really taken the chance to be open and honest when it was very likely that they, were harmed, or they were, you know, completely, bashed or anything like that. And so it's important to, again, carry that torch forward. And that's the way I see it. And again, it's been a calming symbol for me. Ever since I was younger, I always had a rainbow flag hanging up, and it's gave me a sense of calm. It's just, that symbol has meant a lot to me. Sometimes it makes me want to cry when I think about it, because of all I've went through. And so again, embrace those things that give you a sense of pride and belonging. So again, thank you guys for this. I really enjoy enjoyed sharing this video, and I really hope that, again, this gave you a little bit of calm and comfort. Again, I'll do another video likely in the next week. I've been trying to focus on doing these videos every weekend, and really, again, share a lot of these topics that hopefully you guys will find beneficial. And of course, if you check out my fitness content, feel free. I'm very, very passionate about fitness, and again, about health in itself. I think it's important in so many ways, but I do think it is also important to embrace our identity, and really embrace ourselves, mentally, and who we are. So thank you guys once again. I'll see you guys in the next video.